All right, today we're going to start an intensive study of the book of Mark. You can find all these resources at PursueGOD.org/Mark. Make sure to listen to the full audio podcast, which is available in the links below. But I want to start with this question as we get an intro to this Gospel of Mark. If you wrote a book about what mattered most, what would be the first verse? Now, the reason we're asking that question is because today we're just going to take a look at the first verse, but we're going to save that for the very end. And we're going to come back to this question at the end as well. See, the book of Mark is the shortest gospel of the four gospels. It's probably written around 55 AD. It's an action gospel with vivid descriptions and fewer teachings than the other gospels. So, for example, you'll see verses like this from Mark chapter 1. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, Jesus saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea because they were fishermen. And Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Pay attention as you read through the Gospel of Mark. You'll find the word immediately 40 times in this short book of the Bible. That's why the Gospel of Mark is one of the best Gospels to read if you're just starting off reading the Bible. Now, let's talk a little bit about the author. The early church unanimously believed that this account was written by John Mark, who likely got his information from Peter's preaching and memoirs. We meet John Mark in Acts chapter 13. This is the first missionary journey of Paul. It says, Paul and his companions then left Paphos by ship for Pamphylia, landing at the port town of Perga. There John Mark left them and returned to Jerusalem, but Paul and Barnabas traveled inland to Antioch of Pisidia. Now, we don't know exactly why John Mark left that first missionary journey, but we learn a little bit more about it in the second missionary journey of Paul, recorded here in Acts 15. It says, after some time, Paul said to Barnabas, "Let's go back and visit each city where we previously preached the word of the Lord to see how the new believers are doing." So he's talking about his first missionary journey from Acts 13 and 14. Barnabas agreed, and he wanted to take along John Mark. But look at what happens next. Paul disagreed strongly because John Mark had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not wanted to continue with them in their work. In fact, their disagreement was so sharp that they separated. Barnabas took John Mark with him and sailed for Cyprus, and Paul chose Silas, and they went on Paul's second missionary journey. So whatever motivated John Mark to leave them during that first missionary journey, we know that Paul didn't agree. Paul considered it a desertion. But look, later on we find out in 2 Timothy 4 that Paul had apparently made amends with John Mark. He says there, "Only Luke is with me. Bring Mark with you when you come, for he will be helpful to me in my ministry." So that's Mark, the author of the second gospel. Now, who's the audience? The original audience was likely Gentile, that means not Jewish. It was possibly written during a time when persecutions threatened the church. Now, we know that because Mark explains Jewish customs in detail, something that he wouldn't have to do if his audience was mainly Jewish, which also, by the way, makes it a great read for people like us today who might not be Jewish reading the Bible. Now, one last thing, let's talk about the big idea. Mark wrote this account to show the world who Jesus is and what he has done. The central theme of Mark is outlined in the first verse of the book. So here it is, Mark chapter 1, verse 1. Here's how Mark starts the book. "This is the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God." Clear, concise, and compelling. Let's break it down real quick. The good news literally is the word gospel. It's the good news that Mark would have been sharing with his companions on both of his missionary journeys that we just read about. And the message is all about Jesus, the Messiah. Now, the name Jesus in Hebrew was Yeshua, and it means that Yahweh is salvation. So it's the message about the salvation that comes to us through Jesus Christ. And Jesus is the Messiah. This was the expected ruler, the expected deliverer of the people of Israel. Messiah means anointed one in Hebrew, or in Greek it translates to Christos or Christ. So the word reflects thousands of years of hope and prophecy that is being fulfilled in the person of Jesus. And then finally, Mark says that he's the Son of God. And this was really surprising for the people because they didn't understand exactly how the Messiah was going to appear. They thought that maybe he would just be a great king or priest or ruler. But Jesus, it turns out, is God himself, the second person of the Trinity. And we're going to learn more about who this amazing God-man is as we read through the Gospel of Mark. But I want to finish with the question that we started with. If you wrote a book about what mattered most, what would be the first verse for you? Talk about that question along with others as you study the book of Mark with a small group, with your family, or with a mentor.